Hello, everyone. We are going to just give it 30 more seconds to let people join, and then we will get started. It's great to see everyone. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's afternoon for everybody, even though we're coming from all across the country. Welcome. My name is Kathy Anthes. I am most recently the former Commissioner of Education for the state of Colorado. And now I have the honor of leading a new initiative called Forward from Polarization to Progress at the Public Education and Business Coalition. And it's an initiative designed to help educators prevent and decrease polarization in their work and in their community. As we all know, there's a lot of polarization in our country right now, and educators are really feeling that intensely. So I am so pleased to be here today to support Civic Learning Week and to introduce to you all a great panel of educators who are going to give us some ideas about how to integrate bridging divides and building civic capacity and civil discourse into our K through 12 classrooms. So with that, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel. Super excited to have them all here today. First, we have Mitch Espeland. Sorry, Mitch, if I got that wrong. But Mitch is a veteran high school social studies teacher from Cody, Wyoming. I don't know if he's getting quite the snow we're getting in Colorado, but Mitch was trained by Essential Partners and incorporates dialogue into curricular and extracurricular topics for students 9 through 12, including the school-wide program of We the People. Mitch is moving into the administrative space next fall at Cody High, and he plans to use his dialogue training for both staff and community members in his new role. So welcome, Mitch.
Thank you. Very excited.
Yeah. Next, we have Liz Clay-Roy. And Liz is the CEO of Generation Citizen. That's a national nonprofit organization committed to providing youth with the knowledge and skills they need to actively participate in our democracy. So Liz, we are so excited to have you today to contribute to the panel. And last but not least, we have Nick DeMoro. Nick is an instructional coordinator for Genesee Valley BOCES and a councilman for the town of Clarkson, New York. And he has taught social studies in middle and high school for over 10 years. Nick developed and ran a New York State Seal of Civic Readiness program and currently offers professional development on civic engagement throughout his region. He has a firm belief that schools can be the place for honest and open discourse, but that school districts need to highlight and commit themselves to civic education and all that goes with it. So I hope you all are as excited as I am to hear from these amazing folks. And I'm going to kick the panel off today with a question for all of our panelists. So we will start with you, Liz. We'll put you in the spotlight first. Where are you seeing conflict and polarization show up in the K through 12 space? What issues are you dealing with, and what is one thing you're doing to try to address it in your organization?
Thanks so much for the question and the chance to be in conversation with everyone today, especially during this really exciting Civic Learning Week. And what I appreciate about Civic Learning Week actually is it's a place where I actually do think we're having some really healthy and positive conversations about the potential and promise of civic learning to both prepare students to be active citizens in their communities throughout their lives, but also to think about the role of civics education in schools. schools. It's no surprise to anyone on this call that the question of social studies has become itself a kind of site of polarization over the last 3 or 4 years. We have seen more contestation over the kinds of subjects that students are talking about in the classroom, the kinds of reading materials and curricula that teachers are using to guide their students through these conversations, and even, of course, the books that are in the libraries, in school libraries and community libraries. So the question itself about civics and history related subjects are both very much a site of contestation and, in fact, restriction. At the Civic Learning Week National Forum a couple of days ago in Washington, D.C., some researchers from the RAND Corporation shared some of their findings about the restrictions on what students can learn, impacting over 20 million students today. And so we know that that is a source of challenge that's coming up in school board conversations with parents, with educators, and with administrators. And one of the ways we've sought to contribute to really supporting bringing folks together around these issues are to develop materials for the Generation Citizen teachers we work with and the administrators to help them demystify what happens in the civics classroom so that parents are able to relate to what's going on in their students' learning from a place of greater knowledge, because the way you should not learn about your child's high school or middle school curriculum is on cable news. That's actually not where you're going to get the best or most accurate information about it. And so we want to support teachers who, of course, have been overwhelmed with the post-COVID dynamics, just to be able to easily and effectively communicate to teachers. And we also, through at the end of the semester, when students are sharing their student projects, we invite community leaders in so that they can see what students care about, what students have been working on, and ensure that there's open and thriving communication between students and adults in the community. Oh, Katie, I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much. Same question to you, Mitch. Where are you seeing polarization show up in your space?
So I don't want to repeat an awesome answer already. So I'm going to take a little bit more of a lens of with students themselves. So I work with 9th through 12th grade, world history, US history, and then finishing at our school, we finish with government civics types of classes. And the very interesting dichotomy is a lot of what we just heard of those national, really polarizing types of issues where they become very emotional within students. And it's a real quick divide between students of that student's liberal or that student's conservative, and that teacher's liberal and that teacher's conservative. And we get those conversations more or less trickling in from the community in that lens of a national landscape, which is probably why a lot of us are here. It feels polarized. It is polarized. But then when things come down to a more locally nuanced type of level or even issue focused level, a lot of that polarization starts to disappear. Not necessarily that the opinions or the ideas do, but what I see and what we see in our department is students are able to see each other as people in those instances. And, oh, I never thought of that idea in that case or that one. For bringing up a localized state issue right now that we're seeing is whether or not our state's going to allow concealed carry guns from anyone in schools. So could be a very hyper polarized issue within the national landscape. We live in Wyoming that is very conservative, but even when we bring it down to just that issue focused, students give themselves some grace to have nuance on that, of like they'll ask questions such as, well, where? Well, all gun-free zones. And I think that that's something really interesting, that once you take the national politics or I like the cable news politics sides of things out of it, then a lot of that polarization will disappear.
That's great. Thanks, Mitch. Nick, how about you? Same question. How are you seeing it play out in your space?
Yeah, so two great answers already, and I don't want to, dip in too much in the classroom. For 10 years, I taught in a very small, rural, upstate New York district in Orleans County, one of the highest voting counties for Donald Trump in both elections in the state actually. And so in the classroom, it was kind of like when I was still teaching social studies 7 through 12, I taught it all. It was a small amount of students, some parents that would be ambivalent about this kind of work at first, but once we kind of had the conversation and we would bring it back to things like, free speech and in the New York State Seal of Civic Readiness, students have a really unique opportunity to explore passions and take different directions. And so this is a year-long project that our seniors do that they would track a problem of practice. For instance, one student would do something to the effect of, or one student did, I should say, did her project on should we teach LGBTQ plus curricula in, elementary, middle school, high school classrooms. I have another student that did one, should we arm teachers, right? So by allowing student interest to choose really their problem of practice and investigate throughout the year, you kind of have these side-by-side pathways going. And so organically, students begin to, we'd have research days in the classroom, we're at a conference with them, and organically they begin to talk about their issues. Kind of, what are you researching? Where are you getting your research? Those kinds of things. I had one student do one on veteran outreach, and she actually worked in the town hall, open office hours, walk in, trained by veteran outreach centers, and veterans to come in and get services. And so when the public saw that there was space for all these different ideas and research, a lot of that calmed down right away. And so by just making a space for students to explore their paths that they're interested in, it really depolarized quite a bit of the district, and we really didn't encounter too many issues. But I will say one unique thing that I see pushback, and it's not even intentional, it's competing with ELA and math. Right now, social studies is by far and away the fourth content area, and we're reaping the unfortunate, I can't even use the word benefit, but we're seeing the effects of that in our society right now. And districts are so driven by their test scores, their reading and ELA scores. Here in New York State, I see people nodding. It's across the country that, we just don't have time for that, and it's a crime. In 2017, I spoke at one of the colleges around here in a TEDx Salon event about this called Bringing Social Studies Back. And I thought to myself, what an awful title. Why do I have to even bring it back? It made me really sad. And so here in this region for our BOCES, and for those who don't know about New York, BOCES are like when districts pool their resources together. So this is 22 small rural districts, and BOCES will have like trade and technical schools, but I work on the school improvement team now for social studies coordinating and those kinds of things. We're doing something called the Civi Awards. So students that do great civic work in our region, we have 5 awards. We name them after local kind of historical figures that exemplify the quality of that award. We're also trying to align as much of our work with SEL and media literacy as much as possible. So teachers who are overly worked, burned out in districts don't see this as one more thing. They see it as the thing, and how the thread of civic education intertwines. It's not a separate line. So in my opinion, actually the greatest threat to this work is the focus on test scores and math and ELA, even more than the parents, because districts don't even feel like they have the time or space to it.
Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks you guys for answering that question. Now, we are going to have sort of a special video panelist now talk about the importance of this work. And so I want to introduce Governor Cox from the state of Utah.
Hi, I'm Governor Spencer Cox of the great state of Utah and chair of the National Governors Association. This year, as chair, I launched an initiative to address the divisiveness we're seeing in our country. Governors and citizens across the nation are tired of hyperpartisanship and polarization. We need to learn to persuade without hating each other and attack ideas, not people. That's the core of the Disagree Better initiative. Now, you might ask, why am I bringing this message to you during Civic Learning Week? You see, I believe, and many of my fellow governors on both sides of the aisle would agree, that teaching our young people about government and debate is one of the most effective things we can do to reduce partisan animosity. If we can ground our young people in civic education, giving them a sense of intellectual curiosity humility, empathy, and a willingness to see complexity, then we can change the narrative that the people we disagree with are bad people or trying to destroy our country. Civic learning provides a solution to keeping us together as a nation, and the research backs this up. A survey by Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement highlighted that those individuals who recalled having civics courses as part of their education were more likely to have positive views toward terms like bridge builder, liberty, and common ground. Most notably, they were 25% more likely to support the concept of civility. And the polling reflects what I've heard in conversations. More than 2/3 of GOP primary voters, Democratic primary voters, and K-12 parents alike think teaching civics is more important than it was just 5 years ago. What's more, a 2021 Heritage Foundation poll found that nearly 3 out of 4 teachers and 4 out of 5 parents wanted more time spent on civics. This is one of those areas upon which there is actually broad agreement. But the great thing about civics is that it can also help us all disagree better. I'm grateful for the professionals, volunteers, educators in every subject, in after-school programs and Boy Scout and Girl Scout troops, with YMCAs and American Legion chapters, all making the necessary human investments to keep our country strong. And in Utah, I was proud to sign HB 273, which provided $1.5 million in grants to support constitutional literacy initiatives, media literacy, and digital citizenship, and academic service learning. Like in many states, advancing civic education, this was a bipartisan bill, one where not everybody got what they wanted, but came together around a shared idea. Investment in civic learning is not only an investment in our students and educators, it is an investment in all of our citizens, our communities, our state, and our constitutional democracy. I'm proud that many of my fellow governors, both Democrats and Republicans, have joined the Disagree Better campaign. This includes my good friend, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado, who as NGA Vice Chair has been a great partner in our Disagree Better initiative. He's a longtime advocate for education as a business person, State Board of Education member, member of Congress, and now governor. I'm grateful for our conversations that have demonstrated how we can disagree better together, and I'm even more grateful for our shared effort to showcase the millions of Americans across the country who are actually doing this work. On behalf of my fellow governors, I want to thank our educators. The work you do in teaching and modeling deep inquiry and respect for differences is one of the most important contributions to the future of our democracy. Keep up the great work. Our nation owes you a debt of gratitude.
Wonderful, thank you. I hope you enjoyed our special guest panelist there, but Governor Cox just perfectly highlighted what Nick was saying, just the importance of focusing on civic education, and that there is actually research that shows when students have civics classes, you know, this polarization can be decreased a little bit. People understand how to share ideas in a more respectful way. And so that was a really important piece there. I want to move on to our live panelists now and ask another question. Mitch, this one comes to you. Across many disciplines in education, we're moving away from, you know, feeding students information to building experiences for students to learn explicit skills. Can you tell us a little bit about how you teach civics education and how it's changed over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure I'm like a lot of people on here that when I first started teaching, especially government civics, that I was going to teach a lot of facts, right? We were going to get to what powers Congress has and the president and what it means to go vote. And it was a lot of how it's done, how it's going types of things. And there's certainly lots of value in that. You can't not teach those things. But a tool that I've incorporated within my classes is I kind of call it the who cares method. And that's where we're teaching these foundational skills, and then I really like to use dialogue. That may be my only disagreement with Governor Cox is I start to despise the word of debate, where the idea is there's a winner. I know there's different interpretations there, but for me, and this is where he does say this, we see people as people. And within my classes now, we have weekly Controversy Fridays. And that's these dialogue opportunities where I do say something like, hey, does the First Amendment give a right to discriminate? So that in itself is a very controversial statement. We can all agree, hey, discrimination is bad. That's a settled question, right? But we're teaching civics now of, okay, is that First Amendment right, whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I haven't had anyone take right to petition in there yet, but when we look at those things, how can we see how people are viewing the First Amendment and where those limitations to the right are, and in what categories, and what parts of the right are most important to me as an individual versus what parts of the right are more important to you. And as all civic educators or any educators on this call know, there's always limitations to these things. And what we find in those dialogue conversations is I might have a different view of what that limitation should be, but we can also refer to how maybe governments, how courts, those types of places have seen those things. So by using this tool of dialogue, where again, possibly a really controversial issue, but maybe not a super polarizing, intense issue, we can study civics. It doesn't always have to be abortion. It doesn't always have to be guns. It doesn't have to be those hyper nationalized issues. It can be something that I'm using my First Amendment every day in class, right? I chose to wear this t-shirt, and should I be able to have the F word on it, right? Should I be able to have those types of things? And then that's relatable to students, and we're able to, again, see each other's people. So that's been a huge change that I've made us with this Essential Partners practicing, for a little plug for that, advising those idea of teaching kids to listen, not necessarily always to listen to respond, and then looking for those shared moments.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a really important point, because we know in the research, decreasing polarization, you have to have deep listening, because if people don't feel like they've been heard, that's when the polarization becomes extreme, because they feel they just have to scream louder in order to be heard. And that's where it gets difficult. So thanks for bringing that up. Liz, I wanted to ask about your experience. When you integrate bridging divides into civic learning, what have you seen when you've done that? What have the outcomes been?
Sure, thank you. So for us, the approach of supporting young people to learn bridging skills as a part of civic skills has been a part of Generation Citizens curriculum from the beginning over the last 14 years. And in particular, we're really looking at supporting young people to be able to listen well, speak persuasively, and operate from a set from to problem solving. For us, that means having them begin their very first lesson. It's a part of their GC Civics time, is creating a democratic classroom. And that's important for a couple of reasons, both because the teacher is meant to act during GC time, not as an instructor, but as a facilitator, right? So we're asking students to take greater responsibility for the space, but also inviting them to talk about their rights and responsibilities within the classroom. And this comes and is connected to them having read the Constitution, but also how can we create an environment where difficult issues can be handled with care? And so that enables them to set the kinds of classroom norms and conditions that enable them to have a semester long of brave and important, courageous conversations about the issues that matter to them. Then, because with our project-based civics approach, students are taking on a real issue facing them in their community, and they don't just pick an issue and then tell each other, oh, I'm doing this issue, I'm doing that one. They have to come to consensus as a class about an issue they'll take on together. but we've got diverse classes of 15 or 20 or 25 students with different points of view. So that means the process of identifying issues that matter in the community and then having meaningful and deep conversations that have them move to consensus requires a lot of dialogue and really thoughtful disagreement. So first we have, a strong focus on high quality research and participatory action research. So not only are we looking at what can we find in trusted records around this issue, but also can we do some shared surveys of our school community, for example, or of our local neighborhood, so that we have a set of shared facts that we believe in together that enable us to take action on the issue. The other thing that we do that goes beyond just our time in civics classes together, but some of the resources we offer teachers and students is a tool that we worked on with the Greater Good Science Center and Making Caring Common, which was a kind of 15 activities and lessons that are practices to bridge differences aimed at K through 12 and that can be used in home or in school. And we developed these last year in part because we know that hyperpolarization is the air we're all breathing. And so wanting to support that students are often actually well equipped to manage this because a good classroom requires navigating debate, but knowing that they benefit from having some activities and tips that help them bridge what they're doing well in the classroom and when they might be in the hallway having a debate about an issue in which they have very strong and different opinions, and helping them do that well in all of their settings actually fosters them to be able to work as a team around solving civic problems.
That's great. Yeah, I love the concrete activities you all are talking about, and we'll share those tools around at the end of this call. So thanks for sharing that. Nick, how have you seen this civic learning impact civic engagement in your community? So when you teach these bridging skills like listening, understanding, empathy, those sorts of things, have you seen it impact the way students choose to engage in the community?
Absolutely. And really, we've had to, with the Seal of Civic Readiness project, when we did run it and helping districts implement their SEAL projects, there's a lot of care and norms that need to be established at the outset. And things go off the rails pretty quick if the educator in the room, the district, hasn't sort of accepted that, like, okay, like, when we started this in my district, when I was teaching still, I said, there's a great possibility of some good trouble happening. And it did. And we were ready for it. We had established the norms, and the norms we established of listening to understand, I'll explain a couple other ones, really increase civic engagement in the community as a whole. For example, we end the program with a Holly civic night where the community comes in and students kind of display their work and there's a dialogue. But for example, just some of the stuff that we've seen, Liz mentioned how some students and some of the projects they're doing have to come together to do an issue. It's not just their own. One district in my region now that I assist with the SEAL and I help them develop their program, they have the first half of the year is a collective issue. So it was youth homelessness was their collective issue. And they're in a small rural area in Oakfield, Alabama, New York. Yes, Oakfield, Alabama, New York is the name of the school district. And they actually went to Buffalo. So I love that project because you have the rural in New York, we have this rural urban divide as well. And so that bridged even across the geography a little bit. And so, but now they're going into individual projects. So I love the spin that they took to make it their own. Other things you see in SEAL projects that we worked with were op-ed pieces to local papers with a call to action. And I like the projects about forcing is maybe not the right word, but encouraging. No, actually it is forcing. The project forces students to take action in their community. So they have to create be informed products that inform the community. And then they have to create a take action product. So internships, op-ed piece of the paper, like I mentioned. One student I had do a march for on the Day of Silence for LGBTQ plus awareness and suicide in our district. And you can imagine with the district I described, this is back when I was teaching last year, that created some interesting dialogue. And we actually did have a restorative circle with some parents afterwards and really kind of walked through, hey, like, these are the other projects side by side with this one. And really it was a great conversation. I was not there for it. I kind of went off the notes from everybody in the room that I met with afterwards because my son was born that week. But it was good to see that I didn't need to be there for that that the groundwork the district had laid kind of took it forward. And so, we would do other things in the classroom. We're trying to stress to parents in the community, and parents love their kids. You got to meet these conversations with grace as much as you can. They just want to, know what's going on. And we would talk about how we're not seeking to persuade young Americans. We just want to seek to live together and move forward, because we all got to live in this together. My co-teacher and I were kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, very close to the middle together. And we often talk about this idea called check yourself, right? So when something happens in the news, we would go to one another and say, okay, check yourself, right? We would kind of talk about it and just show how we bridged. We would model it for students when current events came up in the classroom. The idea of a first draft of thoughts, right? Assume good intentions. Your first draft of thoughts is just that, your first draft. It's okay to change that in creating that environment, and that increased civic engagement because students felt less afraid to share their opinions. And so, they began this, we noticed in the projects, they began to seek out others in the community that thought differently than them. They wanted to surround themselves with people who were different. They didn't want the quote unquote echo chamber effect to happen. And I think of all of this, and I teach my kids this in the first day. John Haidt's Righteous Mind talks about this, how humans usually go to intuition first and reason second. The Enlightenment and kind of Western culture teaches us that reason kind of governs us and we're above that. But no, the data really bears out we're intuition gut thinkers. And we need to reach into reason a lot of times. And so by telling students that up front, they began to notice it, oh, my intuition took over. And I encourage them to talk about things not related to politics when they meet somebody different. Our senators fly into DC and get out. They don't hang out anymore. And so it's unfortunate. Long answer, but yeah, that's how we notice the engagement.
That's great. Yeah, so much packed into that, but really, really important stuff. And we do see these skills transferring from school to place to community. And that's really what we're all about, right? So kind of last question for the whole panel, and then we'll move to some audience questions, but I'd like each of you to answer this. And Nick sort of already answered it in his beginning stages, but in 2 years, the US is going to celebrate its 250th birthday. And when you think about the current state we're in and where we want to be, what are your hopes for the next 2 years? So Mitch, how about we start with you this time?
Okay. I think I'll start with my concerns because I want to end on a more wishful hope, happy tone. So yeah. I think as far as in my community and nationally, I get worried about the idea of people sorting more and more. Within our state, for instance, there's a bit of a purity test going on within the Republican Party itself. We're so predominantly Republican, but that has seen polarization within polarization, which academic mind is fascinating, but in reality mind, it has the power to rip apart some of these local communities that right now have less of that polarization. Once you get it down to those localized issues, again, that's where it's the smallest. But that is one of my biggest concerns, that as we see national rhetoric continue to trickle down, I know this isn't just a red state thing, it's a blue state thing too. And as that trickles down, that's a worry. My hopefulness aspect is eventually those loudest voices that we probably all know are the minority in most communities, but they're the loudest ones that eventually the majority will start to come together and say, listen, we can see each other as people, that we can see these disagreements between issues, not just people. I think one of my least phrases right now is they are crazy. Who they are, where they are, I don't know. But that is such a divisive statement from whoever is stating it, that if we can start to get apart from that of, well, they're just another person that just believes fundamental differences than you. I kind of go back to the John McCain, Barack Obama debates on, hey, we have fundamental disagreements, but pretty decent people overall. And that's what I would hope we can start to shift towards again in 2 years, where, hey, fundamental disagreements are good, great, even if we can work through them. But seeing people as decent human beings.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Mitch. Liz, how about you? Where do you hope we are 2 years from now?
So I'll do the same. I'll start with my concerns, which is I think, we have a crisis of hope. We have a crisis of trust. We have a crisis of belonging right now, and seeing just far too much despair and mental health crisis. We're seeing a lot of cynicism just expand rapidly as trust has declined in institutions and in each other. And then the crisis of loneliness. And I worry about those deepening. I worry that those will get worse as a result potentially of political rhetoric in 2024 and potentially beyond. What I'm hopeful about, because I do see young people, I do see Generation Z with a deep commitment towards solving problems in their local communities, a deep interest in issues, and just a deep care for one another, which is often shared in ways, online, in the growth of kind of wellness culture. So I think there are ways that Generation Z can move us forward. But that requires us having, I would say, greater mutual respect across generational divides. I think it's really important that we recognize that teenagers are not like citizens in waiting until they flip the switch and turn 18, but in fact, they're already community members who have something to offer, something to contribute, but they will only do so if they are invited, supported, and respected along the way. And similarly, of course, we know that young people have, much that they can learn from those who are older in society. And so I hope that we will see greater collaboration and mutual respect across generations, and more young people running for office and winning, so that we see more generational diversity in public office from local through federal.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Liz. And Nick, how about you? Oops, you're on mute now. Your turn to be on mute.
Yeah. Everybody's got to do that once, right?
Yep.
I had to mention the local government thing that Liz mentioned. I think I was, up until last year, the youngest councilman in Monroe County by like at least almost 10 years.
Yep.
But that's yeah. I have to go back to something my professor said after I graduated. It's the guy who wrote my honors thesis, which I have a lot of respect for. And we were talking about some of these problems a few years back at a workshop. And he so eloquently put it, you're married now, right? And I'd just been married the year before. And he said, when there's a problem between a husband and a wife or any couple, right, no matter what that looks like, if you don't discuss that problem and it festers, it's going to be really bad. And so we have that same thing in this country right now, where we know we have these issues, we know they're there, and we can either just kind of silently go our separate ways and show up on election day and sit in our bunkers till then. And, the red brings their 50%, the blue brings their 50%. And then we just stop building consensus, right? And just come out and show up and see who gets it. Or we can talk about these issues and try to do something about it. I'm really concerned about my kids and their future in this country. I have a 2-year-old daughter, soon to be 3, and I have a son that's about to be 1 in a couple of weeks on April Fool's Day. And I left the classroom, as much as I loved it, to get into this job to try to affect it on a larger scale, in large part because of them. I want them to grow up in a country where the system works, the system lasts, and people can see themselves in the system no matter who they are. We have to, my other concerns are a lack of social capital, right? A lack of people involved in social organizations. You can look at since Watergate, this trend of a lack of trust in our institutions and organizations across this country. And people aren't part of Kiwanis, Lions clubs, right? Social organizations. We've kind of all gone into our I hate to use the term again, bunkers, and we don't communicate with our neighbors anymore. And I'm also concerned there's a lack of nuance too in political opinion. This idea that just because somebody comes from one side of the aisle, that they have nothing to offer. I enjoy listening to people who think differently than me. What happened to the idea of like, oh, not everything I say is quote unquote tainted because I'm the other, right? You might like an idea that I have. You might not like this one, but you might like that one. And so my hope is, though, that we can share and recreate our vision for the country in a common direction, what it looks like, because right now we can't agree on that. Gordon Wood's Radicalism in the American Revolution is my favorite book. I've read it a couple times. And what Gordon Wood spends so much time on is that founding generation was so obsessed with virtue, civic engagement. Now, who was taking part in that system is a big piece of the debate. We have to acknowledge that. But they were obsessed with virtue, civic engagement, and a disinterest in seeking self-servingness and self-power. They were obsessed with it. I mean, Washington was so obsessed with it, he walked away after 2 terms. And, you know, I just think we're so far away from that in what kind of leaders we have today. We're just completely away from the disinterest. And I don't think we'll never have a generation like that again. We can't. It's impossible. He actually wrote a book about how we can never have that again. But I think we can kind of try to get back to it and rediscover somewhat of a consensus of what we want this country to be. And I think the place for that to happen is in the classroom. It's got to be with the younger generation. So I am hopeful, though. I think we can get this done.
That's good. Well, I thank you. I think you guys are right. I mean, by providing some hope and by focusing on this in the K through 12 classroom, we're building that generation. I will say from the work I've done in my initiative, we have college campuses that are building initiatives like this too, to help college age students learn to disagree better, building classes, games, all of that. And then there's a lot of wonderful organizations doing this work, like More in Common, Unite America, Rebuild Congress. So I'm hopeful too that there are enough people that are kind of tired of this. They're the sick, you know, there's kind of the 87% majority, exhausted majority, and they've sort of checked out. But if we can show that we can do this better, we can re-engage them. And what better way to do it than starting in the K through 12 classroom? So just another couple, I just wanted to highlight something from an audience member. It's not specifically a question, but just some comments around, you know, given the fact that our K through 12 students are the near future leaders of our free republic, it makes real common sense that we need to bring the very political issues in the current adult space into the classroom via cognitive dissonance, civil debate, and critical thinking exercises. And so that curricula is really what's best defined as true education, not indoctrination, and kind of what the mission and vision of public education is. Like, how do you help equip students to deal with the real world adult problems that they're going to see or that they're already seeing? So definitely invite any of you to comment on that comment. But also we had a question about how, if any of you have engaged parents in really trying to expand this civic engagement and reinforce what they're learning in the classroom. So I'm just going to open it up for anyone to comment on any of those 2 topics.
I can go first. We kind of reach out with the seal with an email at the beginning of every year, and I now encourage districts to do that now that I'm not directly involved in the work. I said it earlier that parents are concerned about, they love their kids, right? And they want to see what's going on in the classroom. Unfortunately, a lot of times they haven't been in a classroom. I always joke that like teaching and nursing, and there might be a couple other professions in there, are the jobs that, you know, you need a high level of education to do, but everybody knows how to do your job better than you do. And it's just kind of the unfortunate part of the landscape, right? But I've had great success when you welcome parents in, and a lot of teachers are afraid. I'm running a book study now in the book called Learning to Depolarize by Kent Lindsay. And I asked the panel of teachers I have, you know, what's the number one thing that comes to your mind when you hear this? And they said fear. And a lot of teachers who are untenured, there's a lot of fear. You know, and I encourage teachers to do a couple things. Inviting parents into the beginning is very important. Sharing about yourself so they can see more than just a teacher, than if you're comfortable with that, and as a person. A lot of things, same things we encourage the kids to do. I had one particular instance where I had a teacher call me, not teacher, excuse me, a parent call me about a lesson that we were doing on the Rochester, New York uprising of 1964, which was kind of colored with a lot of the civil rights events around the country. It was on national news at the time. And this is right when the critical race stuff was coming into the news, right? When CRT was like, people were concerned. And the parent called me, and it was actually a fantastic conversation. They called me a little upset at first, and I said, hang on, let's go through the documents together, and actually jumped on a Zoom and showed them the stuff, right? And once they saw it, everything was okay. And so we have to be careful of how we fill in the blanks. And this is something I learned in local government as well. If we don't fill in the blanks for people, they're going to fill them in themselves. And they're going to fill them in themselves with what they see on cable network news. And so we need to reach out and have, that's one of the prep works, right? If you're going to do something controversial, you got to like reach out in the community and communicate somehow. And that can be challenging, but that's some of the stuff that's been successful.
That's great. Thanks, Nick.
I'll hop on here real quick. As far as specifically with parents and guardians, we haven't gone to that aspect within the dialogue. Kind of hoping to trickle down more on that side. But what we do have is, and was mentioned earlier, we have a We the People program here. Many of you might be familiar with it, where it's this congressional hearing format where we have our civics kids dive really in depth into the Constitution and within these statewide, national-wide hearing questions. And where we're able to get a lot of buy-in from parents and community members is inviting those higher level, strong community members, whether there's legislators or just business leaders, in as judges for our whole senior class competition as a big night. And it's in those moments that they're able to hear a defense of their ideas. It is much more of like, well, we're trying to prove why we have the best ideas for this question. But it's within that question and answer that they're able to show their diverse perspectives, be able to show how they have thought about these civic-minded questions. And it's the questions themselves that put out are, hey, what do our First Amendment rights of students and teachers restricted by book bans? What does that look like? And the interesting thing is sometimes even within one group, you will get some diverse ideas that then their parents can see, oh, you worked well with a teammate that didn't actually agree with you. And you guys were able to come to some sort of consensus. And that's been some powerful moments for parents, for guardians, and for community members themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful, letting the kids model the way that we're not doing such a great job modeling. Liz, did you have anything to contribute to this last part?
I won't add anything more. I think Mitch and Nick are closer to parents than I get to be, where we're really supporting a group of teachers who I know take on some of those same practices.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, that's going to sort of wrap up our panel discussion today. So thank you so much, panelists, for all of your input and everything. I heard a couple just, summarizing themes around creating an environment. Liz said this, let's create an environment to handle issues with care. Right? Because these are important issues. They're emotional issues. That's why they can move into polarization, because they're so important and they're so critical and they're emotional. So how do we create that environment of care? I heard a lot about humanizing each other. Let's see each other as humans before we tackle the issues. And can we debate issues and not people? And then I also heard a little theme about demystifying that sometimes, like in the media, it's all about fear and generating fear about what are we doing in our civics classrooms. And I heard all of you say in some way or another, like, demystify this for parents, show them what we're doing, and that takes away the fear. So thanks for sharing all that. What a wonderful panel. I am going to turn it over to Becca, and she's going to talk a little bit about some activities and resources that you all can use moving forward.
Excellent. I am going to, if you're all feeling inspired and motivated by what you heard today, all of our fantastic panelists and the work they're already doing and the ideas they have, and even their hopes for the next 2 years and how to mitigate some of those concerns, then we have a couple of things to help you on your way. I am going to start by sharing my screen. Let's see if I do this without any major issues here. We have put together a list of resources. So because we know that your time is precious, these are sorted. You'll see them. There are curriculum and teacher tools, like utilizing this great podcast series on civics education, or joining with Bridge USA, where they have high school chapters. We have standalone lessons. So Mismatch is a joint partnership between All Sides and Living Room Conversations, where you can actually mismatch classrooms across the country to have a dialogue about guns, about news and media, about whatever the different topics are. So that could be a standalone lesson. And then we've even got some really easy grab and go short activities, so 10 minutes or less, ways that you can engage students and bring some of this bridging work into your civics curriculum into the classroom. And the news gets even better. Not only do we have this list, but we also have some funding to get you started on your way. The Pro-Human Foundation has a mini grant opportunity for you. And we'll drop that link into the chat as well. It is for public, private, charter, religious, homeschool teachers are all welcome to apply. The grant application is really short and straightforward. And this opportunity is actually linked with another major national event. So we're here for National Civic Learning Week. And then with this grant and the opportunities that are available for you to take advantage of in your own classrooms, we'll be tracking what you're doing. You can tell us your stories. And then we want to add and spotlight you to an event that we have going on, Bridging Heroes in the Pro-Human Classroom, during the National Week of Conversation. So we're trying to kind of show all the ways that there's this arc of engagement and that there's the great correlation between what you're doing in the civic learning space and what's going on in the bridging differences field, where we're really trying to humanize each other, where we're trying to expose each other to different points of view and different backgrounds and different backstories that people have that cause them to believe the way that they do about different issues and topics. And I really loved the last question about, we're 2 years away from our 250th anniversary. What's the America that we want to be, and what can we be doing right now? And so this list of activities, as well as this grant opportunity, can really help you kind of move forward in that way. I know that the book Kent Lency wrote was mentioned, and he'll actually be moderating the panel during National Week of Conversation. So we hope to see many of you there. If you would like to add your resources, I think Katie was going to mention, but you can add resources to that list. So if you're someone that has great ideas and activities that you're already doing, we can add you to the list to make sure that we get all of your great ideas as well. And I'll turn it back over to Katie to wrap it up.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Becca. Let's see. All right, thank you so much, Becca. So yeah, really, really great resources in there. I was taking a look at them for some of the work I'm doing actually with adults. I do a lot of work with adults on depolarization, and some of those activities are really good, but they're really designed for the classroom. And so I really recommend you take a look at those. Also, we know that you all are experts in your field, so we want to make sure that you have the opportunity, as Becca said, to add any activities you have to this list. You can email Alice. I'm going to put her, or Alice, maybe you can put your email in the chat. But if you have additional activities, curriculum, ideas, case studies you want to share and you want to have highlighted, please send them to Alice at All Sides. That would be wonderful for us to collate all of those and make sure that everybody gets those. So let's do a little silent round of applause for our panelists. I really appreciate and appreciate all the work you all are doing on bridging divides. This is just absolutely critical work, and it takes all of us to do it. So Ace, did you want to close anything out here? I see.
Yeah, there's two things. I'm going to put one in an evaluation form, and Becca put in a grant opportunity. So one, we want to just know how we can keep doing things better in general, and want you to be part of that conversation and be partners with us in that. So I'm putting this evaluation form for you to fill out in that. But also, we have cash, a very tiny bit of support, but we're grateful for the Pro-Human Foundation for leaning in. and creating a grant opportunity for you to share your resources, share your stories, so that we know that we're not all doing this alone, that we're part of a peer community. So Becca put that into the chat. Please check it out. Please also share it with your networks. We want to keep getting the word out and getting a deeper, broader community of educators doing this work.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ace. Appreciate it. All right. So you guys have the activities, you have the grant, you have an evaluation form, and you have a lot of good ideas from our panelists. And we actually got done a few minutes early. So hopefully you all go enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, panelists, again.